Welcome back, everybody, to the Primary Science Podcast, Season 3, Deep Dives. So today will be part 3 of Animals Including Humans, whereby we'll be looking into digestive system, circulatory system, and human growth and development. With us, we've got another rather brilliant lineup. First up is Bryony Turford. She's a freelance consultant, rep and trainer for the Ogden Trust, hub leader for the Primary Science Quality Mark, and co-author for 100 Ideas for Primary Teachers, Science, as well as being on the author team for Snap Science. She is, of course, the co-founder for My Science Club, alongside Paul Tyler, who lots of you will remember from our last episode. Next up, we've got Dr. Hellen Ward, who's a hub leader for Primary Science Quality Mark as well. She's an associate research fellow over at Canterbury Christ Church University. She's part of the author team for Snap Science as well as Cambridge Primary Science. Last but not least, everyone, we have Dr. Rebecca Ellis, who's the regional mentor and writer for Primary Science Teaching Trust, as well as being a content creator for the one and only Explorify. Okay, everybody, if you're ready, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, episode 4, everybody, and what a trio of absolute experts we've got. Thank you all for making the time to be with us today. But before we dive in, I wonder if we could just get a little sneak peek at what's been keeping you all busy lately. So, Bryony, my second returning guest, welcome back to the show. And it honestly just feels like yesterday that we were chatting about what the perfect primary science lesson looks like. And it was just such an amazing chat we had. I think you'll never get rid of me now.
Good. I hope not. I really enjoyed it too. I'm really chuffed to be asked to come back, Tim, and especially alongside Helen and Rebecca as well. How fantastic. Thank you.
It's such a pleasure to have you back on the podcast. So tell us, Bryony, what's been keeping you busy recently?
Oh, gosh, where to start? Ogden Trust. I've been really busy working with the Ogden Trust as a trainer and a regional representative and helping to make physics matter, as the tagline is. Continuing my work as a hub leader with Primary Science Quality Mark, which I understand you're doing with your school at the moment, Tim. Well done. Finally got there. Fantastic. I'm loving still my freelance work as a consultant in schools, running networks locally and online, and of course doing all the amazing extracurricular work with my good mate and buddy, who you had on last week, Paul Tyler, with all things My Science Club related. So lots keeping me entertained.
Absolutely, yeah. Massive shout out to yourself and Paul Tyler again for My Science Club as well. We started using it last year after my first episode with Paul, and the kids, they really can't get enough of it. So I really recommend everybody use My Science Club. Okay, over to Hellen now. Welcome aboard the Primary Science Podcast. Lovely to have you with us.
Thank you for inviting me, especially to my first podcast ever.
What's been super exciting in your world of primary science recently?
Lots and lots of lovely things with Primary Science Quality Mark with a new hub. But also, my main interest is curriculum coherence and cohesion. So I'm challenged at the moment by the suggestion that we should take everything off primary walls to enable retention. So I have been data mining for quite some time, and it's not all that perhaps people think it is, but that's probably for another time.
And to be fair, though, that question is relatable for all of us. We should be optimizing the environment, not just for learning, but for other important things like inclusion, well-being. I really wonder what the data actually shows. So thank you for bringing that up. And over to Rebecca now. Such a treat to have you with us on the show. And I know that your work with the Primary Science Teaching Trust and Explorify is already keeping you very, very busy. But what else has been at the top of your agenda recently?
Oh, hi everyone. It's great to be here. I'm really looking forward to learning lots from you. Helen's already piqued my interest. So this year's a little bit different for me from last year. So last year I was balancing part-time teaching with my primary science roles. I've got a few of them. It was really fantastic because one bounces off the other really nicely, but it was completely exhausting. So this year I put a pause on the teaching. So I can really get my teeth into my role more as like a science mentor, supporting science leaders and teachers. And something that I've really enjoyed this year and found really rewarding was working as part of the PSHE team that are redesigning and creating the latest 2-day course for the thinking, doing, talking science approach, which you might have heard of. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting started with some of those courses. We've got one starting at Science Oxford next week, and there's ones coming up in London and in Birmingham too. So I'm really looking forward to that. I have to admit that I do miss teaching. And so I've been really pleased that we've got some direct to children offerings from at the PSHE at the moment. So I've really enjoyed being part of creating our festive science challenges. So lessons for the whole school around that end of term bit that they're pre-recorded so you can fit them in wherever you like. And we've also been working already on our fabulous online science lessons for British Science Week. So I've been really enjoying that too.
And I also, just before we move on, I wanted to announce a little fun fact that I found out as I was spying a little bit on your LinkedIn page. I did notice that you and I both studied at some point at Cranfield University. What are the odds of that?
I know. I was an environmental engineer a long time ago.
All right. So I have been quite busy conjuring up the next game for this episode, and I'm quite excited about this one. I'm going to call it Classroom Jeopardy. So earlier this week, I gave my students in years 4, 5, and 6 a set of science questions about digestive system, circulatory system, human growth and development. But in true Jeopardy style, we've got the main twist where I'm going to read out the answers that they gave to the questions, and then your challenge is to guess what my original question might have been. And then I just wanted to give a quick note as well before we start. So all of these answers that I received were super, super wonderful. All of them showed how the kids made some kind of sense of these complex ideas. And actually, I did find the process of doing this brilliant for surfacing misconceptions across Key Stage 2. Firstly, we're going to tackle the digestive system. Here's the first answer. It puts acid in your food. So what question do you think my students were asked where they answered, it puts acid in your food? Okay, if you're ready, you can hold up your answer. Okay, what have we got? What is saliva? Oh, and then what's yours there, Rebecca? What is the stomach? Okay, and Helen?
What is happening in the stomach?
Oh, what is happening in the stomach? All good answers. The actual question was, and you don't have to get it word for word, what does your stomach do? So well done. 1 point there for Rebecca and for Helen. Nice. Still time to catch up though, Bryony, don't worry. Okay. By the way, before we move on, here are some of the other brilliant responses I got for that question. It burns your food. It makes it mushier. It breaks food down. So there's a lot of partial understanding there. Okay, on to the second answer now. So it's a little bit more challenging here, but I thought this one was brilliant. Okay, here's the answer. Hospital forever. That's it. Hospital forever. Something to do with the digestive system. And you can play at home as well. Our lovely audience. If you have any ideas, you can scribble them down now. Okay, and then when you're ready, you can hold up your answers, everybody. Okay. Right. No idea. Maybe it was too difficult, this one. What have we got there, Rebecca?
Well, I thought it could be a few things like what would happen if you didn't have, and I thought, first of all, food. And I thought when you mentioned digestive system, well, what if you didn't have a digestive system? Something along those lines.
Okay. And then Helen?
If you had no intestines.
Ooh, okay. Those are all great ones. So the question was, what would happen if you couldn't digest food properly or if you didn't have a digestive system? So I think I'm going to give another point there to Helen and Rebecca. So in terms of the other answers, we got a bit of a mix of panic and logic sort of across the board there. So some of them said you'd need to go to the doctor. One of them wrote you would poop out food. And the other said you'd have no energy. Very interesting little window into the understanding that the children have. Really nice. Okay, round 2, the human life cycle, the stages of development. So this is one of my favorites, and of course, super relatable unit for kids. So the first answer is a list of things: height, weight, wisdom, maturity, physical appearance, and mindset. What do you think the question was? Height, weight, wisdom, maturity, physical appearance, mindset. Okay, what have we got, everybody? What changes as we grow older? What changes as we age? And then what changes as we get older? Good, yes, that's a point for everybody there. What changes when you grow up? Woo! Nice. I really loved seeing the answers to this. So some of the kids went straight to biological answers, and then others were more like philosophical about it. So we got everything from hairy armpits to mindset changes. It was quite interesting. So here's our second answer for the Year 5 unit. A little bit more cryptic this time. So the answer is because they've had enough. Because they've had enough. Any ideas? Oh, Helen's in first.
Why do we die?
Why do we die? Because we've had enough. Okay. Good one. And then is that what you said, Rebecca?
No. I said, why do some people stop reproducing or not reproduce? I think Helen's answer is much better.
Oh, okay. Good answers. The actual question was, why do grown-ups stop getting taller? Other answers were that otherwise everyone would be super tall. They're not wrong there. And because also they've reached the limit of bone stretching, which was a particular favorite of mine. Okay, round 3, final round, everybody. Circulatory system, Year 6 unit now. So the first answer is because you need more oxygen. Because you need more oxygen. What was the question?
I went for why does your heart beat faster?
Okay, nice. Anyone else?
Why do we breathe faster? Brackets, heartbeat.
And any ideas there, Bryony?
Why do we breathe?
Why do we breathe? Okay, nice. I think technically I'm going to give you all a point there. I'm feeling generous, and I'm realizing that this game is more difficult than I originally thought it would be. The original question was, why does your heart beat faster when you run? Or why does your heart beat faster? So quite interesting there. And we got some pretty decent answers considering that Year 6 have not studied the circulatory system yet. So they're still linking movement, oxygen, blood all together. It's pretty good. And the last answer, the last one is, so your body parts work. So that your body parts work. Once you've got an answer, you can just shout it out.
Why do we need blood?
Okay, nice.
I'll let you in on why I'm so terrible in a minute when everyone's finished.
Okay. Anyone else got an answer?
Why do we have biological systems? It seems like way too hard. I don't think it's a good one.
Interesting. Okay. And Helen?
Mine's slightly simpler, but along the same lines. Why do we have a circulatory system?
Ooh, okay, nice. So the actual question itself was, and Bryony got this one word for word, Why do we need blood? Well done. That's brilliant. That is
I think I
awesome.
deserve that given my shocking performance. Anybody who knows me knows that quizzes are my absolute panic point. I can't do it. I don't want to do it. I overthink it. I worry. And I just have to take my husband for a quiz and then we're fine. Can't do them on my own. I actually opt out of them as well. I run the other way. And when you said classroom jeopardy, I was like, oh, this will be great. No, it's a quiz and I'm terrified.
Oh, no, I'm so sorry. Well, thank you even more so for playing. Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you all so much. You're excellent sports for giving it a go. And we can have a quick little breather and jump into the main discussion. So this is where we really start the deep dive and go through things based on the curriculum objectives. Year 4 is where the science starts to get sort of gloriously messy and they learn about the digestive system. So let's have a little chat with Bryony first. Beyond that famous or infamous rather food bag and tights demo, what's the way you've helped pupils see the digestive process without sort of losing half the class to giggles?
Is it okay to say I think that demo is done really badly most of the time I've ever seen it? I honestly, it strikes a fear of God in me when I'm working with you and they go, we're going to do this one. I'm like, okay, breathe. And I will say why I think that, but because I mainly think it's taught at the wrong point in a teaching sequence, or it's used at the wrong point in the teaching sequence most of the time. And there's a lot of cognitive leaps children have to make to use a model. And when they're 8 or 9, those leaps can be a bit too far for many children, and they don't always understand why there's orange juice in the model, or why there's crackers, or why there's scissors, or what else. And then it ends up with being a demo or a copy me rather than actually children engaging in the modelling process. I like to start with something that helps me understand, a bit like you were saying with those questions, Tim, that you did with your children, that I like to start with something that helps me understand what they know before I go into helping them do that in a way that they understand the digestive process. So for many, many times I've done this, I've paired them up, big sheets of paper, draw around someone's body, and then 2 different coloured pens and draw the journey of the food. So whatever food you like to eat, whatever your favourite is, eat it, and then what happens in the body. And I've done it on small bits of paper with little outlines, or big giant bits, like I said, with pairs on. But it shows me and the teacher, so much about what they know, but also what they don't know. For example, if the class already know the role that the mouth plays, so within that Year 4 digestive system stuff, there's a bit about teeth, isn't there? So depending on whether they've done the teeth bit first, they might already understand the role the teeth have within the digestive system and the mouth. So there doesn't need to be then another entire lesson on the part that the mouth plays. We can absorb that. But if they don't know and you haven't done the teeth bit, then that is times to be spent. If they don't know that the body absorbs nutrients, if literally the children think that food goes in and comes straight out again, and the body doesn't take what it needs, then that obviously needs more time spending on it. So yeah, once we're confident, then the class can describe those simple functions of the basic parts of the digestive system, quote unquote, the statutory part of the national curriculum. Then perhaps the modelling process of digestion could be really useful, using crackers, orange juice, scissors, tights, whatever tools you want to do, and a great way for the children to demonstrate that they can actually describe those functions. For example, they could be heard saying, the scissors are representing the incisors to cut the food. And then also things like, I'm squeezing the tights to model the esophagus as a muscle moving the food down the tube. That gives much more purpose to that activity, even if it's them orally saying that while you're modelling it, if you only want to do one and you don't want the chaos in the classroom. But that done too early in the learning journey becomes about following the teacher, and the amount of times I've seen, put the things down, don't touch the thing, because we're not doing it at the right point. And that's where the giggles and the chaos comes in. It's not that I'm adverse to a good giggle in a science lesson, don't get me wrong, but then the opportunity perhaps to go back to that large diagram, or go back to that small diagram and have another go at it, or notice what they now know at the end of that learning journey, for me feels more purposeful.
And I definitely get what you're saying there. And over to Hellen next. It is essential, of course, that the kids build that vocabulary. They learn the names of the parts of the digestive system and so on. But how do you get from naming those parts to explaining what each part does, its function in, an engaging way?
I think learning vocabulary in science is like learning a foreign language. I totally agree with Bryony that we need to know what the children know. I probably would ask them to do their own and then show the pictures at the front of the room to identify the vocabulary that's already there, the knowledge that we know, and the things that we need to work on. I would also play a lot of games. So if we are learning vocabulary, it needs to be used all the time. And it needs to be, dare I say it, up around the classroom. Because Jensen would say, we use our environment not only as a tool to help retention, but it also provides emotional support. Having our own work up around the classroom, fitting things onto a working wall, has found to have lots of positive impact on children learning some of the unusual vocabulary. If you've got the bouncing ball, you can throw it around the classroom, and whoever catches it has to say the word. And for some things like esophagus, I know many children of that age who actually phonically would find that difficult, and I'm probably one of them, and I'm slightly older. So they have to say the words and then try and work out what that is and whereabouts in my body it might be. I have some amazing pictures that children have drawn where their intestine is tied up like a snail. And they have 2 different types of stomach, which is my favourite one at the moment. Did you know that children have a snack tummy and a food tummy? And obviously the snack tummy never really ever gets full, but often my food tummy is full, especially if it's something I don't want to eat. Now, if children are, using those sorts of vocabulary, then we're not getting the scientific ideas out there. So I do believe that we need to play many different types of games, that we need to maybe do the carousel. Like Bryony said, I'm not that happy about the tights activity. The only thing I think is great about it is when they squeeze in the small intestine element, their fingers get sticky. And that really helps them to understand that there must be something coming out that contains more than water. And that sugary stuff is actually what is going to end up in the bloodstream. So I think there's some really good bits. But I think to understand about how the esophagus works, I might have a station for each of the organs with the vocabulary there and little things like, sorry for those people who hate balloons, but I have about 50 different things you can use a balloon for that demonstrates all sorts of science processes. But if you have a long balloon and the children squeeze it, it helps see how things can move through. So science activities that teach things we can't see don't have to be complicated, but we need to think really carefully about what we are teaching rather than whether they're having fun. And there's some amazing research which found that when we ask teachers what children will remember from this year's science, they nearly always talk about, saying digestion, the food activity. But the children actually remember the activities where they followed their own questions and they worked in groups. So at the end of the year, if you did the Coke and Mentos activity, you will remember it, but they might not.
And so finally for this unit, over to the lovely Rebecca. What have you found that helps pupils link cause and effect? Get that sense of the stomach breaks down food, and then following on from that, the small intestine can then do its job.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I totally agree with what Helen and Bryony have been saying about there's loads of new vocabulary. And that's important as long as we don't go too far, because it's the main parts, isn't it? So we don't maybe need to mention the gallbladder and too many extraneous things. But on the actual journey, it's nice to kind of describe it simply like that. It is the journey that the food takes through our body. And so some activities where that's the focus, I think are really helpful for children to kind of link it all together, like you said. So a few things that I used this year that I found really helpful for that. So first of all, I'm reignited with the idea of science songs. But I've been thinking about this and I realised that I'm extremely picky about them. So, and I think that's just what teachers are like about any resource you bring into the classroom, isn't it? So I would look at a science song. I'm not picky about the song. I don't care about the music genre because some kids will like different things, but it's about how far they go with the vocabulary. Are they mentioning just the things that I want to mention? And importantly, if they start mentioning other things, that's it. Can't do that song. So, but I found it really, really useful in this topic because there was a great one by someone called Mr. R. So hopefully you'd be able to find that on the internet. And he balances being quite engaging and funny. There's a few noises in there, but I think has anyone seen Traitors and Celia Imrie? We can all kind of identify with the joy of farting, and it is funny. So yeah, it's got that in it, but it's also got the important facts. So like the verses are going through just the main organs and what they do, but then the chorus is really good because it talks about what is digestion. It breaks down food to give me nutrition, and it rhymes and it's catchy and it kind of clicks and children start repeating it. So I found that really, really great as something kind of like retrieval practice, really. And also I was quite often teaching science on a Friday afternoon. A little bit of a movement break that's really purposeful is really good. And you can kind of just use it when you think, right, they need a little bit of something. This is going to be useful and lift the mood as well. Another one that's really good is drama. So I'm sure you might have done this before where you get the children lined up like a conscience alley in 2 lines. So they're creating that pathway. And then you ask along the line children to be different parts of the digestive system. So you might start off with the teeth, the mouth, the tongue, the esophagus, but also so that children don't switch off, like remind them like we are all part of this system. So as you might be talking about the stomach, but listen in and check that everyone else is doing their job correctly. So listen in and think, what would I say if I was the teeth, for example? Then I put myself usually in role as the food for the first go at least. Describe what I am, maybe a cheese sandwich. Describe what I feel like, and then get them to talk about what they're going to do to me as the food and describe what happens to me. And then as I move down, kind of go through the whole process of that journey, which is really nice. And another one that I discovered last year, which is really good to kind of get over that misconception that the food just kind of like falls down through the system under gravity, is I found a little BBC clip of Dr. Mosley who swallowed a camera, and you can see the muscles of the esophagus kind of like like pushing and gradually forcing the camera down, and that really made the children think about what was going on, how their body was controlling that movement from one part of the digestive system to the next.
That's brilliant. I think I've actually seen that clip. Was it might have been part of the Christmas lectures, I wonder. And I wanted to ask you about the singing part as well, because I know a lot of teachers, sometimes including myself, depending on how I feel that day, kind of struggle with getting like a quieter class to engage with the song. I wonder if you've got any top tips for getting, the shyest of students to join in somehow and just keep getting that dialogic practice regardless.
Yeah, I totally empathize with that. And I'm a really, really, really bad singer, like really bad. And so I kind of think that what helps is, that the songs nowadays, they've got the videos, haven't they? So they can watch and they can listen the first time, but just to kind of go for it yourself and show that like, this isn't really about the singing. This is about saying the words, joining in, having fun with it. And sometimes that does take a little bit of acting on my part to start off with, but I think it's infectious when you see other people starting to have fun and join in. It's something I probably wouldn't force though, and there might be some classes that it's not right for. So yeah, use your teacher judgment.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Sometimes you just got to go for it and just belt it out and have fun, and they'll follow suit. Nice. Okay, thank you everyone. So that's the digestive system covered. So next we move on to year 5, where things can sometimes get a little bit more delicate, but do link very, very nicely with PSHE as well. We've got the human life cycle, growth, change, puberty. So I wonder, Bryony, do you have any advice for just keeping it, super factual, firmly rooted in the science?
Yes, I agree. I think, although it is worth noting that we're in the statutory guidance, it doesn't say thou shalt teach about puberty. It does in the non-statutory, perhaps, but therefore that connection with PSHE is probably very, very important for teachers to make. And lots of those teachers like to teach the two things at the same time, and therefore consider what time of year they do that. So that's often later in the year when teachers know their children better and can handle sensitivities that might arise, but also there's perhaps a little bit more maturity around the class later in the year 5 year. And so that could be something to ponder on. But back to the science, the statement in year 5 is the shortest entire bit of the national curriculum, isn't it? If you go into the year 5 statement, it says, describe the changes as humans develop to old age. Describe the changes as humans develop to old age. That's it. So what does that look like? And for me, there's a great opportunity to connect to earlier learning and make those connections. As you were saying, it's the first time they see themselves in that whole thing. So tracking back through their primary science journey, they have already learned in year 2 the statement, notice that animals, including humans, have offspring which grow into adults. So that's a great chance to connect to amphibians, birds, reptiles, fish, mammals that they did in year 1, and think about what a reptile looks like as it grows into, what a bird looks like as it grows into an adult, what a mammal looks like, including a human. So they've done that simple sort of stages in key stage 1. Then in year 3, they have more about this thing called a life cycle when they learn about flowers and the part that flowers play in the life cycle of flowering plants. And then in year 5, depending on when the living things in their habitat stuff is taught, they've also got describe the differences in life cycles of a mammal, amphibian, reptile, and insect and bird. And then they've got describe the life processes of reproduction in some plants and animals. So there's a real connectivity, isn't there, between within year 5, but also prior to year 5. So therefore, knowing that living things reproduce in a factual way, as in they just do, and the scientific way for plants, so that's much more, they learn much more detail in that with plants. The focus here on teaching in year 5 is just about the stages of human development from birth to death. That process. And for me, that's really simplified into, and we could argue the toss about whether these are the right steps, but for argument's sake, let's say they are birth, baby, toddler, young child, older child where puberty may start or often starts for some children, teenager, young adult, brackets where reproduction happens and then we go back to birth, then older adult and death. So that sort of simplistic stages, and by being clear about those stages, it's much easier for us to calm ourselves and stick to those facts. And that appears a little bit like a checklist right now, but that's that starting point, and that I don't need to overly worry about the other bits right now. That's what I'm trying to get them to do. So the children at the end of this teaching can describe the changes. So from birth to toddler, from toddler to young child, etc.
Yeah, nice. That clarifies it quite well. And I guess we can tackle it a lot more objectively and factually in year 5, keeping that in mind. I'd like to ask Hellen, so from your perspective, how can we help children see growth and aging as an evidence-based process rather than just, that checklist of stages? So in other words, how can we bring what Bryony was saying to life for the children?
I think that it's as Bryony said, we need it to be factual so that people can cope with it. I would always start with the big questions. So one of the key things that we avoid as humans, not just teachers, is anything to do with death. We know it's going to happen, but we ain't going to talk about it. And yet that is something that science really needs to address. The other thing, although in the statements it talks about the human life cycle, in the other parts of the curriculum for year 5, we do have life cycles. So I would have a big question that could be, do all living things have life cycles? Because plants do, and if it's living, there will be a life cycle. That life cycle might be a little bit interesting. One of the nice and interesting things can be asking the children to come up with their own big questions. If the governor's statement includes the opportunity to talk about sexual reproduction in more depth, and some schools do and some schools don't, then does everything start from an egg? Now, that egg could be a seed if it was a plant, but there is an egg stage. So there's an opportunity to widen it out from it being just humans. They will have seen and probably have younger siblings, so they know what babies can't do and what big people can. But also asking the ridiculous questions, like one of the questions I was expecting the answer to be in your game at the beginning was something that ended up with watch TV, go out at night, go to bed when you fancy, which were the answers to the questions set in the SAT papers on what can you do when you're an adult. The question was badly worded, and what it wanted was for the children to understand that reproduction was the thing that children aren't able to do, but it didn't come out in that sort of way. So I think that getting the opportunity for children to see that we're part of a bigger life cycle as living organisms, that some creatures have a lifespan of more than 400 years, whereas others, its adult stage, like the mayfly, is only 1 day. Its actual whole life cycle spends much of its time as an insect in a nymph stage and actually lasts for, a number of years. Part of the practical work that we do is important for science, but one of the other types of science we should be doing is research. So thinking about what is it that enables something to live 400 years? And scientists at the moment are looking at animals that live in the very deep sea where it's very, very cold, and the depths enable animals to grow slowly, live longer, and have different systems and enzymes, which they're now looking to see if we can borrow some of that technology to enable us to maybe live longer. But we could also ask the children, do all humans live to be 100? And if not, why not? Which gets us back to the bit about the fact that our bodies, do wear out and things happen to us. So I think it's important that we do include the whole cycle and talk quite openly about the fact that everything lives and then dies.
Yeah, you're bringing the big picture thinking into it. And I think that's exactly how it becomes relevant. And at least for me, you were even talking about biomimetics and things there. Incredibly fascinating as well. So thank you very much for that, Helen. And finally, I wonder if you could help us with this last bit, Rebecca. How does this unit here bridge into year 6 in terms of that systems thinking that we were talking about earlier?
Yeah, no, this is a really interesting one. I think year 6 is a really good time to make that word systems a little bit more explicit, because they've come across it. We might have on the board skeletal system, we might have digestive system, but we don't really talk about that word. So having a little bit of a discussion, like, have you heard the word system before? When have you heard it used? I've had children before who are quite sporty talk about sporting systems, those kind of formations in football and things that they know really well, and asking what's the purpose of having this system, why the managers so intent on it. And it's the idea that each player, although they're all kind of working towards the same overall purpose, they have a different role. And that's a good way to kind of draw a parallel with, in terms of a biological system, each part, and then you might start using the word organ or not, depending on your children, has its part to play, but they're all working together on that overall aim. So kind of doing a little bit of that, and then looking at what systems they've already looked at. So kind of giving them a chance to reflect on those. And the way that I've used lots of times is by giving them a picture of the skeletal system, the digestive system, getting them into groups, getting them to annotate what they can remember. So they're sharing that knowledge, revising a little bit, thinking about what the purpose of that system is before you start your work on the circulatory system. So picking that moment to do it. And that gives you the chance to also think, do they need a little bit of a top up here? So it might be in your computing time, you might be able to borrow 10 minutes here. And there's a really nice human body game Siemens have done. So they can literally just do a little bit of revising. There's a fantastic build the body game where you're putting your bones in the right places. And the other game that I've used quite often it comes from Kagan Techniques, I think. It's called Quiz Trade. So I create little cards where the question's on the front and the answer's on the back. And they become the expert of that question because they've got the answer. You get them to stand up and move around, find a partner, and then they quiz each other. Sometimes I do a little bit of coaching here, actually, which sounds really basic, but like when you meet your partner, you look them in the eye and you say, who wants to go first? Just a little bit of, smoothing the wheels of oracy and getting them interacting with each other, not just going to friends that they know. So then they say their question, they have a go answering it. Then the other person says their questions, have a go and answer it. Then they decide, do I want to keep my question? Do I feel like I know it really well now? I might want to trade and swap and then move around again. So it gets them up, active, using their brain and getting that bit of revision done before moving on to the next section in year 6.
Yeah, that sounds actually like a great game that could work for vocabulary retrieval in lots of different subjects. That's pretty good. And the Siemens Human Body game, is that like a free online game we can access anytime, or?
Yeah, should I give you the link for the show notes?
Yeah, I'll chuck it in the description. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Rebecca. Okay, so finally, everybody, year 6, sort of the grand finale of the human body units. It's the circulatory system. So over to Bryony. So as we all know, you've got a bit of a gift for bringing things to life in a practical way. And I wonder if there was a way that teachers could show circulation in action without turning the classroom, into a full-on biology lab, which would be cool, but we can't all do necessarily.
Oh, one of my favourite ways to do this has been a little bit like was discussed earlier around modelling the digestive system. I think Rebecca was talking about having like a conscience alley and being the food, and doing something with the circulatory system, taking the time to teach that very slowly and carefully, and not just gathering them all and going, right, you're the heart, blah, blah, blah. So for me, that's a big space, like a hall, a sports hall, an outside space, or moving the furniture in the classroom, sitting in a circle and talking about the parts of the circulatory system. Well, we need the heart, we need the lungs, we've got the rest of the body, and that's the easiest way to sort of do the other bits, isn't it? Just the rest of the body. Well, I need someone who'd like to be the heart today. So you've got your 3 people, your heart, your lungs, and then a bit like Rebecca was saying, she might be the food. I might become some blood, a bit of blood to begin with, and take a route around those. So, and talk about what happens when I'm traveling through the heart, when I'm traveling through the lungs, when I'm traveling through the rest of the body, back through the lungs, back to the heart, and when that's secure, I can get some children to play those parts as well, and then build that up so that there is a chain of children taking part and taking that figure of 8 route around the human circulatory system. So they understand the blood's constantly moving. It's not something that the lungs not sitting there waiting for the blood to arrive, and the body, rest of the body is waiting for the blood to arrive either. There's a constant movement of blood, and it's a liquid opportunity to collect solids, liquids and gases, learning in year 4 opportunity there. And then when if that's appropriate, I've also done it where I've had double-sided bits of red and blue card where the children have been able to begin to understand that oxygenated, deoxygenated blood, and that where the oxygen is used, where the blood becomes deoxygenated, where it needs to get more oxygen from, if that bit's appropriate. But it might not be. It might be simply understanding that the blood travels, in and out of the lungs, in and out of the heart, etc. So yeah, that would be my sort of top way of making that practical.
Amazing. Thank you, Bryony. And yeah, it sounds like these drama games, as well as getting the kids moving, they're a great way of, making that invisible idea, concept more visible. And I think quite often the role play activities can be quite a highlight for the kids as well. So Hellen, you've supported so many teachers throughout your career so far. What strategies have you used that help them just make sense of those abstract ideas like gas exchange or pulse rate, so that the children really get into it?
I agree that drama is actually a really useful idea, and the way in which Bryony's talked about it being built up over time. I tend to divide the children into 2 groups after they have had practical experience about the different elements. I'm finding more and more classes of children in year 6 actually dissect the heart. If you're going to do that, there is guidance, and you need to go to CLEAPS to find out exactly how to do that appropriately. And there's many things that some children will get out of that experience. And it seems to me that it's something that happens more than perhaps in the past. I have never dissected anything in the classroom, and I don't think I ever would. I am not really very good with blood, to be honest. So I don't think it's a thing that children have to do. But if you're going to do any drama, the children need to have the opportunity of seeing what's happening as well as being. So half the class must see the activity and take their pulse rates. I've always found it very useful to get the children to take their pulse rate by following down from the eye and then underneath their chin, and only counting for 15 seconds, then doubling and doubling. If you've got children with beanbags, red ones and blue ones, you can then start to think about, if I am collecting, as the blood, collecting a red beanbag from the lungs, taking it to the heart tends to be with children holding hoops, and then going to the muscles where they hand out the red ones and the muscle hands back blue. You can make it more complicated if you want, and there does get to be part of the system where you need a lot of beanbags. Because obviously you need the system to keep on going. When the children have been the blood and raced round and the muscles have been exercising, the children who are sitting and also moving take their pulse, and we then record what's happening with different people and then talk about why that might be. When they go back to the classroom, they need to then create the model themselves that they have been in and talk about what happens at different times. In the same way as if I was doing the types activity, we would be doing it with a whiteboard so that they can write the systems as they go. So having the model there for them to see, and then them downloading what they got out of the game in the classroom. Otherwise, it really just becomes something that, as you said, is fun and the children like to do. But we all know that there's nothing wrong with fun. I'm a great believer in fun in science is important, but it also has to be learning. So our children have to have time to download that. And that would be one thing I would say to the teachers. Think about how you get those processes over to the children and give them time to really show you that they understand about exchange, if that's something that you decide you want your children to learn.
Brilliant answer. Thank you very much. Okay, so over to Rebecca now to help us with the next one. The lifestyle bit of this unit can sort of easily slip into health talk, which, you know, is a necessary thing. But how do we keep it rooted in evidence, you know, data, measurement, investigation, so that it stays science while still tackling the PSHE part of it?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because health, I always think, is quite personal, and you think about your families, and it is science, but it's something that I have always felt like I want to be quite sensitive around. But there's some really good things that I've done that do just what you said, like get to the heart of the science of it. So one thing that I really enjoyed this year with my year sixes was the TAPS focused assessment plan. It's called Heart Rate Poses, and it gives children a bit of agency as well, the opportunity to design their own tests, which is really, really nice. Goes back to something Helen said earlier. And it's all based around this question: can we increase our heart rate without moving? Which kind of gets you thinking, and children tackle it in different ways depending on their interests. So I had children that were doing planks, children doing headstands, dance balances, yoga poses, and they kind of planned it all out in their little groups. And it also then hit the objective, because obviously I did this after I'd done the kind of classic, does exercise increase your heart rate? So they'd done that practice that Helen talked about how to measure their own pulse rate. So they had those test results. They can make these predictions about what other things could increase their heart rate. And then they set up their own comparative test. So a really nice way of hitting quite a lot of things for the year sixes. Thinking about diet, there's a few Explorify resources that I would recommend. So to start that meaningful discussion, we might begin by making children the experts. And I'm sure you've all seen the have you ever questions on Explorify. So have you ever been told to eat more vegetables? Really, really simple, relatable question that kind of all children are going to identify with. But it can build towards the why, can't it? Why do people keep telling us to eat vegetables and fruit? And that a lot of children then can share their knowledge about what those foods bring to us health-wise, the importance of fibre as well as vitamins and minerals. And then a fun counter is a what if question. So what if you only ate chips is on there too. So asking children then to think of a positive, that might be easy, a minus, and then any other interesting consequences to really get them thinking and building their understanding about the importance of a balanced diet. And then a really nice new activity that's on there that I introduced my Year 6 children to it's called Super Broccoli Food Research Scientist. And it features Dr. Charlotte Armour. It's in the Celebrating Science section. And it's a really short video because I think you can lose children if they get too long. But it gives a really good, real insight into what a food scientist might do. She talks about buying the broccoli, but then also organising her participants and what she's doing with them. And I think I didn't do this because this is something I've been working on using recently. There's an app called ChatterKid where you can take a photograph, draw a line which turns into a mouth, and then record your own little commentary. So bringing an inanimate object to life. So I was thinking, like, if you got them to choose their favourite fruit or vegetable, have some kind of choice. So you'll need them to be able to take the photograph. They can then create their own 30-second animation where you, for example, have a banana talking about how healthy he is and why you should eat him. I thought it'd be a really fun thing to do next time I'm teaching it.
I actually love that ChatterKid idea. That's a proper golden nugget of advice there. You know, I'm always looking for new ways to get technology into science lessons as well. So ChatterKid, definitely using that one. Okay, thank you very much. And that's it. So we've journeyed right through food, birthdays, and blood. And if I could, in the name of making the most of this sort of once in a lifetime opportunity of having this particular trio of experts together, could I ask for just one more bit of teacher toolkit gold? You know, so in addition to the activities and investigations that we've already discussed, what's one activity or strategy that just never fails you? Like the kind that works across ages and topics that any primary or maybe even secondary teacher could do tomorrow. So Bryony, let's start with you. What's your go-to body systems demo that always delivers at least a few eureka moments?
I like blood soup, although I have to say I do prefer to do this as a children doing it rather than a demo. I think demos have to be very carefully used in primary. They can become quite disconnecting for children to watch somebody else do something that they would like to be doing themselves. But with this one, it uses food, and I am very consciously trying to reduce my use of food for waste purposes and trying to use food in the classroom when it will be eaten for lots and lots of reasons, but I feel it's something. So for those reasons, I might move towards doing this as a one group demo, but it's been a really powerful activity for children to engage in some research to find out what the different parts of the blood are for. It works very simply. The children do some research. They come and exchange their research for items for their bag of blood soup. So instead of just making soup, they're actually finding out, ensuring that they know what percentage of the blood that part makes up, what its purposes are, any other key information. Really helps cement their understanding of the function of the blood and busts a few myths along the way. For example, and so I tend to use, for white blood cells, I use marshmallows. For red blood cells, I use red jelly or red sweets. For platelets, I use rice. And then for plasma, I use orange squash, very weak orange squash. So that research could be done as a class. And then we make one giant blood soup, or the way I've done it in the past, the children make either individual ones or in pairs. And then I had a classroom with glass windows that looked out onto the corridor that was a really common thoroughfare. So we sellotaped our blood to the windows so that, of course, everybody that came in our classroom went, "What's that?" And I went, well, you better tell her we've got... So the children orally rehearsed, like they probably answered it that 10, 20, 30, 40 times after the event. They're like, oh, that's so-and-so. And if you look in that only makes up da-da-da. And the plasma, this is the blob of the plasma. And this is and it really helped them. And again, a little bit like we've talked about, sometimes these things can go too deep and too much information. But that was a really good way of whether it's a demo or not. I'll leave that open to everyone's choice.
Nice. And there you go as well. Coincidentally, another argument for having displays in the classroom to stimulate more oracy and practice. Excellent. Okay. So over to Hellen. What's one analogy or model that's just pure magic for helping pupils visualize what's going on inside their bodies?
Analogies are great fun, but you need to ensure that the children have the understanding of the system that you're going to look at. So some of the children that I've worked in, not far from the centre of Canterbury, I found had never actually been on a train, had never been to London, and probably hadn't had the opportunity even to go anywhere more than a mile away from where they lived. So an analogy for the circulation system that was, say, built on a train station using the tracks, etc., might have been more problematic for some children. So whatever analogy you use, it's going to simplify something. For heart and circulation, I like the train circuit, but I do know that some of my colleagues are very keen on using the road map, showing how different sizes of roads doing different things can show about the blood. Because in that way, your little tiny roads, like where I live, would be your capillaries. But if you take the train circuit, one of the nice things about AI, and the school I'm a governor with has given AI to all the teachers. And if you ask AI to create you an analogy for blood within a train system, it will do so, showing it, having little people on it if you wish it to, with little shout outs. I've got a picture of it, so I will send it to you. I don't know how you'll be able to use it, but if you can, it really shows that it helps teachers with their planning, and the train system in that way probably helps the children understand something. I always think analogies is a very good way of understanding what science is. Science is incredibly complex at all levels. And whatever we've been talking about today has been simplification. The human brain can only understand things by making stories, by making analogies, by using models. So science is model making at whatever level we use. And as long as we understand that whatever we think is true is realistically an analogy or a model, then as things change, which they will in our children's lives, they will be able to understand that science isn't wrong. It's just the way in which we are able to understand it that changes over time.
Nice. Okay. I love a bit of AI. And thank you for bringing that point up. And on to Rebecca. What's a simple tweak that teachers can make to help pupils see connections between all these systems rather than treating them separately?
Yeah, so I think the one that I would be most encouraging teachers to do is to think about adding higher order thinking opportunities. So there's kind of quite a lot to this, but a good go-to resource would be to look at the PSHE website, and they've got a section called Bright Ideas Time. And there's lots of examples there which talk about the links and the misconceptions that you can make. So, for example, simulating a really deep biological discussion about whether something is alive or not and how you could tell. So they've got things like a hot question, how do you know that the person next to you is alive? So it kind of really gets children thinking. There'll be some really obvious answers to that question. Then you can go deeper and you can go deeper. And having the confidence to kind of let children really think deeply about those things is really, really valuable. Or another one, is a flame alive? In many ways, it seems like it could be. So actually getting to, they know it's not, but getting then to the point of how can we see the difference? How can we categorize and use what we know about what's alive to kind of like really get into a deep discussion? And they're quite open questions. So you are kind of it's quite an inclusive challenge that you're offering.
Yeah, good. Thank you. And that's important as well, to get them talking as much as possible. And as a running theme throughout all of these different episodes that we've been doing, that getting the kids to speak, getting the kids to use the vocabulary that you've been teaching and to talk about what they're learning is extremely important. So brilliant. Thank you. All right. So we've covered a lot of ground today, and I do feel like my brain is absolutely buzzing with ideas. I really would actually love to keep going forever, but sadly we must end somewhere. But before we finish though, if teachers could just hold on to one idea when teaching the units that we've discussed today, one central idea, what would you want it to be? So Bryony, could we start with you?
Yeah, sure. I wonder if my thoughts are actually a little bit broader than just the things we've been talking about, and don't overcomplicate things. What we teach in primary is pretty straightforward, and it does have conceptual boundaries. We're great as a profession for making it harder than it needs to be and thinking we need to go further than we do. We've talked about analogies. I'm going to just use one for a moment. If you're building a strong building, you need solid foundations on which to build your next level. So let's make sure that stuff is concrete and firm before we try and put the next layer of the building on, and check back to the curriculum statements. Like that's what you need to teach. If that's not there, there's no point in doing anything further, because it won't have the connectivity that we've all been talking about today.
And Helen, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, science is about complex vocabulary, and lots of research over time has identified that the thing that teachers find challenging is their children's ability to learn the vocabulary. So we need, I think, more importantly, that the children have an understanding of the vocab that they need, that we use it regularly, that we put it on the walls in the times that are related to the topic that we use, that we enable them to constantly in short times identify through games, through lots of different ways, how they understand that vocabulary, what those words mean, and how they relate to what they're learning. Because without that vocabulary, they can't express their ideas. And as most of the schools I work with at the moment are into oracy, vocabulary is the underpinning of our oracy. If we don't have the right words, we can't communicate effectively.
And Rebecca, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm totally on board with both of those things that Bryony, I've said that so many times, Bryony, to so many people. And yeah, Helen, I really feel passionately about vocabulary in science is fantastic, it is empowering, and it should be for everybody. So oracy approaches are also approaches that are inclusive in my mind. So things like the things we talked about today, the higher order thinking, the right ideas, the discussion times, using Explorify, using games, using song, using drama. So opening it up and making it something for everybody.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. And I would just love to say as well, a huge thank you to Bryony, Helen, and Rebecca, not just for giving up your time today, but just for sharing super openly and very, very generously as well. And I think in all honesty, it's just super surreal to have conversations like this. And they only really come to life because of just wonderful people like you. And I keep saying this time and time again, but this kind of thing is exactly what makes the primary science community such a special place to be. So thank you for proving that once again.
I'd like to say thank you to you, Tim, for organising this, for setting it up, for curating things, for getting us all together, and for creating this thing that is the Primary Science Podcast. It's incredible in Series 3, and I know more and more and more people are finding the joy that is this podcast. So thank you. Well done.
I'd like to echo that. This series is my favourite series, and thank you very much, Bryony and Helen, as well, for such a sparky discussion.
And as my first podcast, I have to say, I didn't know what to expect, but I think I've enjoyed it. Thank you very much. And I think the ideas shared by everyone will really help teachers to think about their own view on the subject that we've been discussing.
Absolutely. And that's it for this episode, and indeed for animals, including humans as well. Next time, we're going to be deep diving into another behemoth of a unit, living things and their habitats. And as always, if you in the audience have got any suggestions for improving the show, topics you'd love us to explore, just please do get in touch or leave a comment. I'd absolutely love to hear from you. So until next time, everybody, thank you so much for listening, and bye for now.